3 days later, the UES Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Geneva system. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge and stared at what had once been a thriving human colony. The planet hung in space like a dead eye, its surface covered in smoke and ash clouds that hid the continents from view. Lisa Carter worked frantically at her pilot controls, scanning for any signs of life. The readings that came back made her hands shake. No orbital traffic, no communication signals, no energy signatures from the cities that had once housed 2 million people. "I'm not picking up anything," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No ships in orbit, no responses from the surface. It's like everyone just disappeared." Amy Watson tried every communication frequency she knew, calling out to anyone who might still be alive down on the planet. The only response was silence and the faint crackle of radiation from the dying atmosphere. Ben Phillips studied the sensor, readings from his engineering station. The orbital defense platforms are still there, but they're powered down. Someone shut them off from the inside. Jake felt a cold anger building in his chest. New Geneva's orbital defenses were automatic, systems designed to protect the colony from any threat. They should have activated the moment hostile ships approached. The only way to shut them down was from the planet's surface using codes that only the colony government possessed. "Take us down to the main city," Jake ordered. "I want to see what happened here." The Defiant descended through the toxic atmosphere, past clouds of ash and burning debris. What had once been New Geneva City was now a field of rubble and twisted metal. The buildings had been systematically destroyed, not by random bombing, but by careful demolition that left nothing standing. They landed near what had been the government complex, a cluster of buildings where the colony's leaders had worked to build a new life for humans among the stars. Now it was just broken concrete and melted steel. Jake led his crew outside, their environmental suits protecting them from the poisoned air. They walked through streets that had once been filled with families and children, now empty and silent as a tomb. Amy found the first bodies near the spaceport. They were humans, but something was wrong with the way they had died. There were no weapon burns, no signs of violence. They looked like they had simply collapsed where they stood. "Neural disruptors," Ben said, his voice grim through the suit. "Radio. I've seen this before in mining accidents. It shuts down the brain instantly." They made their way to the ruins of the government building, where Ben used his engineering skills to access the buried computer systems. Most of the data had been wiped, but he managed to recover some encrypted files from a backup server. Back on the ship, Amy worked to decode the files while Jake paced the bridge like a caged animal. He kept thinking about the families he had met during his visit years ago, the children who had been born on this world and knew no other home. All of them were gone now, as if they had never existed. "I've got something," Amy said, her face pale as she read the decoded information. "These are shipping manifests and transport orders. The attack wasn't random, Jake, it was organized." The files revealed the truth that made Jake's blood turn to ice. New Geneva had not been attacked by pirates or rebels. It had been harvested by the Krek Syndicate under official consortium authority. The humans had been classified as excess population and relocated for labor assignments throughout the galaxy. "Labor assignments," Lisa said, reading over Amy's shoulder. "They mean slave labor." The document showed that 12 other human colony worlds had suffered the same fate over the past 2 years. Each time, the orbital defenses had been shut down from within by consortium agents who had infiltrated the colonial governments. Each time, the population had been taken alive using neural disruptors, then transported to work camps on distant worlds. The worst part was that it was all legal according to consortium law. Humans were classified as a probationary species, which meant their colonies existed only at the pleasure of the galactic government. When the consortium decided that human settlements were using resources that could be better employed elsewhere, they had the legal right to relocate the population. Earth's government had never been told. The official reports listed the colonies as having suffered natural disasters or equipment failures. The human representatives in the consortium assembly had accepted these explanations without question, trusting their alien colleagues to tell the truth. Jake was studying the manifest when Amy suddenly looked up from her console, her eyes wide with fear. "We have company," she said. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're Zilani patrol vessels." The ships were sleek and beautiful, like works of art that happened to be capable of destroying planets. They moved toward the Defiant with the confidence of predators who had found easy prey. A voice spoke directly into their minds, bypassing their communication systems entirely. It was the telepathic contact method that the Zilani used when they wanted to demonstrate their superiority over lesser species. Human vessel, UES Defiant, you are in violation of consortium space regulations. You do not have authorization to be in this system. Jake recognized the mental voice as belonging to Seer Vanis, one of the high-ranking Zilani officials who supervised human activities in this sector. She had inspected his ship many times before, always with the same expression of barely concealed disgust at having to deal with such primitive beings. "We received a distress call," Jake said aloud, knowing that the Zilani could hear his thoughts whether he spoke or not. "We came to help." There was no distress call from this system. The colony experienced a natural disaster that required emergency evacuation. The situation has been resolved. Jake felt the alien's mental presence pressing against his thoughts, trying to read his memories of what they had discovered. But years of working around telepathic species had taught him how to protect his mind from casual intrusion. "You have seen classified information that threatens galactic stability," Seer Vanis continued. "Your emotional nature makes you unable to properly interpret these data. You will submit to memory adjustment procedures." Memory adjustment was the consortium's polite term for having your brain wiped. Jake had seen it happen to other humans, who had asked too many questions or seen things they were not supposed to see. They always came back as empty shells, capable of working but incapable of independent thought. "We know what really happened here," Jake said, his voice steady despite the fear in his heart. "We know about the other colonies too. What you think you know is irrelevant. Submit now or be taken by force." Jake looked around his bridge at the three people who had followed him into this nightmare. Lisa sat at her pilot station with her hands on the controls, ready to run or fight depending on his orders. Ben stood near the engineering console, his face grim but determined. Amy clutched the data files they had recovered, the evidence of genocide that the consortium wanted to erase. For 53 years, humans had followed orders, accepted their place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy, and trusted the aliens to treat them fairly. Jake thought about the children of New Geneva, about 2 million people who had disappeared into slavery, while their own species was told to look the other way. "No," Jake said quietly. The word hung in the air like a challenge. In all the years since first contact, no human had ever directly refused a consortium order. They had complained, they had asked for reconsideration, they had begged for mercy, but they had never simply said no. Seer Vanis's mental presence recoiled as if she had been struck. "What did you say?" Jake stood up from his command chair and looked directly at the view screen, knowing that the alien ships could see him. "I said no. We're not submitting to anything. We're going home, and we're taking this evidence with us." The response was immediate. Energy weapons began charging on the Zilani ships as they moved to surround the Defiant. Lisa's hands flew over her controls, pushing their old mining ship's engines to maximum power. "Jake, we can't outrun them," she said as the ship lurched into motion. "Their ships are faster than ours." "Then we don't outrun them," Jake said, moving to Amy's communication station. "We outthink them. Amy, I want you to broadcast everything we found. Every frequency, every channel, every human ship and station in the galaxy." Amy's fingers moved over her controls, sending their terrible discovery racing through space at the speed of light. The evidence of the consortium's betrayal, the proof that human colonies were being harvested like crops, the names of the officials who had signed the orders for genocide. "They're jamming us," Amy said, but she kept transmitting. "Some of it is getting through." The Zilani ships opened fire, their energy beams cutting through space toward the fleeing human vessel. Lisa threw the Defiant into evasive maneuvers, using every trick she had learned in years of dodging asteroid storms and space debris. "Warning shots," Ben said as explosions bloomed around them. "They want us alive for questioning." Jake knew that being taken alive meant torture, memory extraction, and eventual death. But they had gotten the message out. Somewhere in human space, other people would see the evidence and know the truth about what was happening to their colonies. The chase had begun, and with it, 6 months into the war, the consortium learned that fighting humans was unlike fighting any other species in the galaxy. Traditional military doctrine meant nothing when facing opponents who treated mutual destruction as a viable tactical option. Engineer Marcus Bell had worked maintenance on orbital station Tython for 8 years, keeping the alien technology running while being treated as little more than a living tool. When the rebellion began, Marcus found himself alone on a station with 30,000 consortium personnel and no way to escape. Instead of trying to fight his way out, Marcus decided to take the entire station with him. He spent 3 days, carefully, overloading the reactor core while the alien security forces searched for him through the massive structure. His last message to Earth was brief and final. Earth remembers New Geneva. Earth remembers them all. The explosion was visible from 6 star systems, a brief new star that marked the death of Marcus Bell, and 30,000 aliens who had thought humans were too weak to be dangerous. Similar acts of desperate courage happened across human space. On the agricultural world of Green Valley, farmer Pete Collins watched Morven peacekeepers land near his fields. The aliens expected him to surrender his crops and submit to deportation to a labor camp. Instead, Collins and his neighbors poisoned their own water supplies and salted their fields with radioactive waste from their farm equipment. When the Morvans tried to occupy the planet, they found a toxic wasteland that would take decades to clean up. The surviving humans retreated to caves and ruined buildings, fighting a guerrilla war that cost alien lives every day. They booby-trapped, abandoned buildings, poisoned food supplies, and turned every interaction with the occupying forces into a potential death sentence. Dr. Rachel Green had studied alien biology for 15 years, always being told that human science was too primitive to make real contributions. When the war began, she finally found a way to prove them wrong. Working in secret laboratories hidden throughout human space, Dr. Green developed targeted biological weapons that affected only specific alien species. The Zilani, with their perfect, telepathic minds, found themselves succumbing to a plague that attacked their neural tissue. The Krex discovered that their hive mind intelligence made them vulnerable to diseases that spread through their shared consciousness. The consortium called it biological terrorism. Humans called it justice for New Geneva and the 12 other worlds that had been erased from existence. Captain Jake Morrison had become something of a legend during his 6 months of running from consortium forces. The UES Defiant had upgraded its weapons and taken on a crew of volunteers from destroyed human colonies. They called themselves freedom fighters, but the aliens had another name for them. Pirates, terrorists, and criminals were the words used in consortium propaganda broadcasts. Jake did not care what they called him, as long as he could keep hitting their supply lines and rescue facilities where human slaves were being held. The raid on Processing Station Delta 7 became the stuff of human mythology. Jake led a fleet of converted mining ships and cargo haulers against a facility where 10,000 humans were being prepared for shipment to labor camps throughout the galaxy. The station's defenses were designed to handle external attacks, not the kind of assault Jake had planned. His ships approached with false transponder signals, pretending to be delivering supplies. When they got close enough, the human crews abandoned their ships and used them as guided missiles. Jake himself led the boarding party that fought through the station's corridors, rescuing human prisoners while alien security forces tried to stop them. The freed prisoners joined the fight, using tools and maintenance equipment as weapons against their former captors. By the time consortium reinforcements arrived, Processing Station Delta 7 was a floating wreck, and 10,000 humans were free. Jake's message to the galaxy was broadcast from the station's own communication array. This is Captain Jake Morrison to all consortium forces. Every human you take, we will take back. Every facility you build, we will destroy. Every world you occupy, we will make into your graveyard. The war reached its turning point at the Battle of Terra Nova, where Admiral Clark Stone faced the combined might of the consortium's Third Fleet. Stone had survived the Battle of Earth and been promoted to command humanity's largest remaining military force. The aliens expected another conventional battle, where superior numbers and technology would decide the outcome. They had not learned that humans did not fight conventional battles when their backs were against the wall. Stone's fleet was outnumbered 10-1, but his ships carried something the consortium had never encountered before. Human crews who had accepted that death was inevitable, but were determined to make it count. "All ships, this is Admiral Stone," he broadcast to his fleet. "Today we show these aliens what human rage can accomplish. Today we teach the galaxy to fear us." The human ships did not try to survive the battle. They used their engines as bombs, their life support systems as poison gas, and their own bodies as guidance systems for weapons that the aliens could not stop. Stone's flagship, the UES Vengeance, rammed directly into the consortium command ship. At near light speed, the collision created a fireball that consumed both vessels and everyone aboard them, but it also took out the alien fleet's coordination systems. Human pilots whose ships were crippled and dying manually guided their vessels into enemy positions. Human engineers trapped in damaged sections of their ships triggered reactor overloads rather than allow themselves to be captured. The Battle of Terra Nova lasted 18 hours and ended with both fleets completely destroyed. But the psychological impact on the consortium was devastating. They had lost an entire battle group to opponents who fought like warfare itself was their natural state. Seer Vanis, the Zilani officer who had first encountered Jake Morrison's defiance, found herself commanding the survivors of what had once been the galaxy's most powerful military force. Her telepathic abilities had been damaged by prolonged exposure to human emotions, particularly the concentrated fury that human crews radiated as they died. In her report to the Consortium High, Council Seer Vanis wrote words that would echo through galactic history. "We cannot defeat them through conventional means. They do not fight to win. They fight to ensure that anyone who threatens their species pays a price so terrible that others will never dare repeat the offense. They have weaponized their own extinction." The consortium leadership gathered in emergency session to discuss humanity's rebellion. For 1,000 years they had maintained galactic peace through the simple principle that logical beings would always choose survival over destruction. Humans had proven that principle wrong. Species throughout the galaxy watched the war with growing alarm. The humans were losing every major battle, but they were taking so many aliens with them that the consortium's military was rapidly approaching collapse. Logistics became impossible when every human worker might be a suicide bomber. Trade ground to a halt when human ships began ramming commercial vessels. The breaking point came when human rebels seized control of the antimatter production facility at Rigel Station. Instead of trying to hold the facility, they simply announced that they would detonate it if any consortium forces approached. The explosion would destroy 3 inhabited star systems and kill billions of beings. The humans made it clear that they were perfectly willing to commit this act of genocide if it would hurt their enemies. For the first time in galactic history, the consortium found itself negotiating with terrorists who held the power to destroy civilization itself. The message from Earth was simple and direct. President Hayes spoke for all of humanity when he made his demands known to the galaxy. Return our people. Recognize our sovereignty. Leave us alone, or we will drag this entire galaxy down with us. The aliens finally understood that they were not fighting a war. They were facing a species that viewed mutual destruction as an acceptable outcome, and that made humans the most dangerous beings the galaxy had ever encountered. The UES Defiant raced through space with 3 Zilani patrol ships in pursuit, their elegant vessels gaining ground with each passing hour. Lisa Carter pushed their mining ship far beyond its design limits, but she knew it was only a matter of time before they were caught. Jake Morrison stood behind Amy Watson as she continued broadcasting their evidence to every human frequency she could reach. The Zilani were jamming most of their transmissions, but some signals were breaking through their interference. "I'm getting responses," Amy said, her voice tight with concentration. "Human ships all over the sector are acknowledging receipt." The first response came from Captain Roy Hudson aboard the cargo hauler UES Ranger. Hudson had been transporting supplies to human outposts for 15 years, watching as alien corporations slowly took over every profitable trade route. His message was short and filled with rage. Message received and confirmed. Those alien bastards are going to pay for this. More responses flooded in as the news spread through human space. The UES Liberty, a research vessel studying nebula formations, abandoned their mission to investigate reports of missing human scientists. The mining platform Deep Strike, which had been ordered to evacuate their asteroid claim to make room for Krex operations, suddenly refused to leave. But the response that changed everything came from Captain Susan Blake aboard the research station Galileo. Blake had spent 10 years studying alien technology, always being told that humans were too primitive to understand advanced science. When she received Jake's transmission, something inside her snapped. All human personnel, this is Commander Blake. We're taking control of this station. Any alien who tries to stop us will be thrown out the airlock. The mutiny aboard Galileo inspired similar actions across human space. Workers on the Luna mining facility locked their alien supervisors in storage compartments and seized control of the communication arrays. Human crew members aboard mixed-species vessels suddenly turned on their alien crewmates, taking their ships by force. On Earth, President William Hayes received an emergency briefing in the middle of the night. Hayes was a career politician who had spent his entire administration trying to improve humanity's standing with the consortium. He had accepted every insult, every reduction in human rights, believing that cooperation would eventually lead to equality. The evidence from New Geneva changed everything. Hayes stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by his advisors, and realized that 53 years of cooperation had accomplished nothing. The aliens still saw humans as animals to be managed and disposed of when convenient. "Sir, we're receiving reports of human uprisings on 17 worlds," General Patricia Stone said. She was the highest-ranking human officer in Earth's defense forces, though her authority was limited by consortium oversight. "Our people are seizing alien facilities and demanding answers about the missing colonies." Hayes looked at the holographic display showing human space in chaos. Red warning lights marked every location where humans had risen in rebellion against their alien overseers. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "The consortium ambassador is demanding an immediate meeting," his aide reported. "They want us to order our people to stand down and submit to enhanced oversight." Hayes had met Ambassador Krell many times over the years. The Morvan's aquatic diplomat always spoke in soothing tones about cooperation and mutual benefit, but his eyes held the same contempt that all aliens showed when dealing with humans. The meeting took place in the secure conference room beneath the presidential palace. Ambassador Krell floated in his environmental tank, his tentacles moving in patterns that Amy Watson would have recognized as signs of agitation. "President Hayes, your species is experiencing a collective emotional breakdown. Human vessels are attacking consortium personnel throughout the galaxy. This cannot be allowed to continue." Hayes sat across from the alien diplomat and felt a calm he had never experienced before. For the first time in his political career, he knew exactly what he had to do. "Ambassador, we have evidence that the consortium has been systematically destroying human colonies and enslaving our people. We have proof of genocide. You have misinterpreted routine population management procedures. Your species lacks the cognitive capacity to understand complex administrative decisions. 13 human worlds have been wiped out. 26 million people have been taken into slavery. You call that administrative?" Ambassador Krell's tentacles writhed in what Amy would have translated as contempt. "The consortium has the legal authority to relocate problematic populations. Human colonies were deemed inefficient uses of galactic resources." Hayes stood up from his chair and looked down at the floating alien. "Then we reject consortium authority. As of right now, humanity withdraws from all treaties and agreements." The ambassador's translator device struggled to process the concept. In the 1,000-year history of the consortium, no member species had ever withdrawn from the galactic government. The idea was so foreign that their computers had no protocols for handling it. That is impossible. Species cannot exist outside consortium authority. You will submit to enhanced oversight, or your world will be placed under protective occupation. "Get out," Hayes said quietly. "I do not understand." "Get out of my office. Get off my planet, and tell your masters that humanity is done taking orders." 2 hours later, consortium battleships appeared in Earth's orbit. The massive vessels dwarfed anything in humanity's defense fleet, their weapons capable of reducing continents to glass. Admiral Clark Stone, commanding Earth's space forces, from the orbital defense platform Armstrong, received a message demanding immediate surrender. Stone had been born on Luna during the early years of human expansion into space. He had watched his entire career as humans were gradually pushed out of every system worth having, forced to accept whatever scraps the aliens decided to give them. Now he stood on his command deck and looked up at ships that could destroy his entire fleet without breaking their shielding. "Sir, we're outnumbered 50 to 1, his tactical officer reported. "They're demanding that we stand down and prepare for occupation forces." Stone thought about his daughter who lived on New Geneva before it was destroyed. He thought about his son, who worked on a human freight ship and had never been allowed to carry anything more valuable than raw materials. He thought about a human race that had dreamed of exploring the stars, only to become janitors and manual laborers for beings who considered them barely sentient. "Send a message to the consortium fleet," Stone said calmly. "Tell them that Earth chooses to stand." The alien commander's response came immediately. "You cannot resist. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Surrender now and accept occupation, or we will take your world by force." Stone looked around his bridge at the young men and women who had volunteered to defend humanity's homeworld. They were scared but determined, ready to die rather than live as slaves. He thought about Jake Morrison and his crew, still running through space with evidence of consortium crimes. He thought about Susan Blake and the other rebels who had chosen to fight rather than submit. "Load all missiles and prepare for battle," Stone ordered. "If they want our world, they'll have to take it from our dead hands." The Battle of Earth began 20 minutes later, when the consortium fleet opened fire on the orbital defense platforms. Human ships swarmed up from the planet's surface like angry insects, their small vessels darting between the massive alien battleships. It was a hopeless fight from the beginning, but Stone's forces had advantages the aliens did not expect. Human pilots flew their ships with a reckless abandon that horrified their logical enemies. When their weapons ran out, they used their ships as missiles, ramming into alien vessels at maximum acceleration. The space around Earth became a graveyard, filled with the wreckage of both human and alien ships. For every human vessel destroyed, another 2 rose from the planet to take its place. Factory workers who had never seen combat climbed into hastily converted cargo ships and flew them into battle with nothing but mining lasers for weapons. The aliens began to realize that they were not fighting a military force. They were fighting an entire species that had decided death was preferable to slavery. Every human who died took alien crew members with them, and there seemed to be an endless supply of humans willing to make that trade. As the battle raged around Earth, similar conflicts erupted throughout human space. The consortium had expected a quick police action to restore order. Instead, they found themselves fighting a war against opponents who did not follow any logical rules of engagement. Captain Jake Morrison, still fleeing through space with his evidence, received reports of the spreading rebellion and felt something he had never experienced before. For the first time in his life, he was proud to be human. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his worn command chair and watched the asteroids drift past his ship. The UES Defiant was small compared to the alien vessels that sometimes passed through this sector, but it was home to Jake and his crew. They had been mining these rocks for 3 years now, pulling rare metals from the cold stone while the rest of the galaxy barely noticed they existed. Lisa Carter turned from her pilot station and looked at Jake with tired eyes. She was young but had already spent too many years in space, watching the same endless dance of rock and stars. Her blonde hair was pulled back in the regulation style that all human crews had to follow when working in consortium space. "Another day of digging holes in rocks," Lisa said with a bitter laugh. "The Zilani inspector came by yesterday and told me our efficiency was still too low. Said humans are naturally slow workers compared to other species." Ben Phillips looked up from his engineering console. He was a big man with calloused hands who had worked on ships since he was 18. The aliens always made comments about how crude human technology was, but Ben kept their old mining ship running when newer alien vessels broke down regularly. "At least we have work," Ben said quietly. "I heard the colony on Kepler 7 lost their farming contracts. The Morvans said human crops were too simple for galactic markets." Amy Watson sat at her communications station, monitoring the endless stream of messages that flowed through space. She was the youngest of the crew, barely 25, but she had a gift for languages and could understand most of the alien dialects they encountered. Her job was to listen and translate, making sure they followed all the rules that kept changing every few months. Jake remembered when humans first met the aliens 53 years ago. The history book said it was a great day for humanity when Earth was finally welcomed into the galactic community. But Jake had lived through the reality of what that welcome really meant. Humans were given the jobs nobody else wanted, mining dangerous asteroids and working in toxic environments that would kill most alien species. The consortium had a system they called the hierarchy of reason. Every species was ranked based on how logical and stable they were. The Zilani were at the top with their perfect telepathic minds that never showed emotion. The Kreks came next with their hive-mind intelligence that could solve complex problems in seconds. The Morvans ranked high because their water-based biology kept them calm and peaceful. Humans ranked near the bottom. The aliens said human emotions made them unpredictable and dangerous. They pointed to human history, to the wars and conflicts that had shaped Earth's past. They said humans were too violent and too emotional to be trusted with important work. So, humans got the mining jobs, the waste disposal contracts, and the dangerous construction work that nobody else wanted to do. They were paid little and treated like children who needed constant supervision. Every human ship had to carry alien inspectors who monitored their work and reported back to consortium headquarters. Jake had grown up dreaming of exploring the stars and meeting alien civilizations. The reality was very different. He spent his days breaking rocks and following orders from beings who looked down on his entire species. But it was still better than staying on Earth where most humans lived, in crowded cities and worked in factories making simple goods for alien companies. The communication system suddenly crackled to life. Amy sat up straighter as voices filled the bridge. Jake could not understand the alien languages, but Amy's face went pale as she listened. "It's a distress signal," Amy said, her voice shaking. "Coming from the New Geneva system." New Geneva was one of the human colony worlds, a small planet where about 2 million humans had built farms and cities far from Earth. Jake had visited there once, years ago, and remembered how proud the colonists were of what they had built. The signal was weak and full of static, but Amy worked to clean it up. Slowly, a human voice became clear through the noise. "This is New Geneva Colony Control. We are under attack, ships everywhere in orbit. They're landing troops and taking people from their homes. Please, someone help us. The orbital defenses won't respond to our commands. Something is wrong with the system. They're taking everyone. Please, if anyone can hear this." The signal cut off suddenly, leaving only empty static. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had never heard terror like that in a human voice before. Lisa was staring at the communication console with wide eyes, while Ben had stopped pretending to work on his repairs. "We need to help them," Lisa said, but her voice sounded uncertain. Jake was already reaching for the communication controls to contact Consortium Command. Every human ship was required to report any emergencies to their alien supervisors before taking any action. He sent the message and waited for a response. The reply came back within an hour. The consortium officer who answered was a Krex, speaking in the clicking language that Amy had to translate. "They say it's outside human operational parameters," Amy reported. "We are ordered to continue mining operations. They say consortium. Security forces will handle the situation at New Geneva." Jake stared at the message for a long time. Outside human operational parameters. That was the phrase the aliens used whenever they wanted humans to stay out of something. It was the same phrase they used when human ships requested permission to explore new systems or when human scientists wanted to study alien technology. "How long would it take us to reach New Geneva?" Jake asked Lisa. Lisa checked her navigation computer. 3 days if we push the engines hard, And how long do you think it takes for consortium security to respond to emergencies in human space? Amy looked uncomfortable. The nearest consortium base is 8 days away from New Geneva. Jake stood up and walked to the main view screen. Outside, the asteroids continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the drama of organic life. He thought about the voice on the radio, the terror and desperation in those words. He thought about 2 million humans on a distant world, facing something terrible while their own species was ordered to stay away. Set course for New Geneva, Jake said quietly. Jake, we don't have permission, Ben said. If we leave without authorization, they'll arrest us when we get back. Jake turned to look at his crew. These were good people who had followed orders their entire lives, who had accepted their place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. But Jake was tired of asking permission to help his own kind. I'm done asking for permission, Jake said. Amy, send a message to Consortium Command. Tell them we're responding to a human distress call. Tell them we'll accept full responsibility for our actions. Amy hesitated for a moment, then began typing the message. Lisa's hands moved over her controls, changing their course toward New Geneva. Ben went back to his engines, pushing them to give everything they had. As the UES Defiant turned away from the asteroid field and jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake looked out at the stars and wondered what they would find when they arrived. He did not know that his decision to help his own people would be the first shot in a war that would change the galaxy forever. 18 months after Captain Jake Morrison first said no to a consortium order, the galactic government found itself facing complete collapse. The war with humanity had spread beyond military conflict into something that threatened the very foundation of interstellar civilization. The Consortium High Council met in emergency session aboard their capital ship, far from any inhabited worlds that might become targets for human suicide attacks. The representatives of dozens of species sat in their climate-controlled chambers and tried to understand how their perfect galactic order had been brought to ruin by beings they had considered barely sentient. High Counselor Zenth of the Zelani spoke first, his telepathic voice carrying the weight of exhaustion and defeat. The human rebellion has cost us 60% of our military fleet, 40% of our industrial capacity, and the loyalty of 17 member species who now question our authority. The Krex representative clicked rapidly in agreement. Our hive mind calculations show that continued conflict will result in total societal collapse within 2 standard years. The humans have proven willing to destroy themselves and us, rather than accept subjugation. What the Council feared most was not human military might, but the psychological impact humanity's rebellion was having on other species. For 1,000 years, the consortium had maintained control through the simple principle that resistance was futile. Species joined the galactic government because fighting it meant certain destruction. Humans had changed that calculation forever. They had shown that a determined species could inflict enough damage to make conquest pointless. Even if they died in the process, other member species were beginning to ask dangerous questions about their own relationship with the consortium. The Deltan Confederacy had already demanded autonomy over their home systems. The Epsilon Collective was refusing to pay tribute to the central government. 3 minor species had simply withdrawn from consortium space entirely, betting that the humans had weakened galactic authority enough to make independence possible. Ambassador Krell of the Morvans floated in his environmental tank and spoke, the words that nobody wanted to hear. We must negotiate. The alternative is the collapse of galactic civilization. Captain Jake Morrison had spent 18 months running from consortium forces, but now he found himself summoned to a meeting. That would have been impossible when the war began. The human rebel fleet had grown from a single mining ship to over 300 vessels, manned by refugees from destroyed colonies and deserters from alien-controlled facilities. The meeting took place in neutral space, aboard a diplomatic vessel, provided by the Deltan Confederacy. Jake walked into the conference room wearing the simple uniform of Earth's merchant marine, facing alien diplomats who had once demanded that he submit to memory adjustment. Seer Vanis was there, her once perfect, telepathic abilities now damaged from prolonged exposure to human emotions. She could no longer read thoughts clearly, and the rage she had absorbed from dying human crews haunted her dreams. Captain Morrison, she said, her mental voice weak and uncertain. You have brought ruin to the galaxy. Jake looked around the table at representatives of species that had enslaved his people and destroyed his colonies. He felt no satisfaction at their defeat, only a bone-deep weariness that came from months of constant warfare. You brought ruin to yourselves, Jake replied calmly. All we ever wanted was to be left alone. The negotiations lasted for weeks, with representatives from dozens of species arguing over terms that would have been unthinkable before the war. Humanity demanded the return of all human slaves, recognition of Earth's sovereignty, and guarantees that no human world would ever again face forced relocation. The consortium agreed to everything. They had no choice. The alternative was continued, war against opponents who treated death as an acceptable tactical option. President William Hayes signed the Treaty of Seoul in a ceremony broadcast throughout human space. The agreement established humanity as a protected autonomous species, with complete sovereignty over their territories and population. More importantly, it officially disbanded the hierarchy of reason that had kept humans at the bottom of galactic society. But the real change went deeper than any treaty. Species throughout the galaxy began studying human military doctrine, not to copy it, but to understand how a primitive civilization had rewritten the rules of interstellar conflict. 3. Concept of mutual assured destruction became a standard part of diplomatic negotiations. Species that had once been easily controlled by the consortium now made it clear that any attempt at conquest would result in Pyrrhic victories that cost more than they gained. Jake Morrison found himself offered a commission as admiral in Earth's newly independent space navy. Instead, he chose to return to mining, taking his crew back to the asteroid fields where their rebellion had begun. The UES Defiant was retired and placed in Earth's orbital museum, a monument to the moment when humanity had chosen dignity over survival. Jake's new ship, the UES New Geneva, carried a simple message on its hull that had become humanity's motto throughout the galaxy. Remember the colonies. Remember what human rage can accomplish. Dr. Rachel Green continued her biological research, but now she worked openly with alien scientists who had learned to respect human contributions to galactic knowledge. The diseases she had created during the war were carefully contained and destroyed, but the knowledge of how to make them served as a permanent deterrent against future aggression. The human colonies that had been destroyed were rebuilt, populated, by former slaves who had been freed during the peace negotiations. New Geneva City rose from the ashes of its predecessor, its memorial park honoring the 2 million people who had died to teach the galaxy that humans could not be disposed of without consequences. Children throughout human space grew up hearing stories about the war, about ordinary people like Jake Morrison and Marcus Bell who had chosen to fight rather than submit. They learned that sometimes the only way to achieve peace was to make the cost of oppression too high for any rational being to pay. On alien worlds, parents told different stories to their children. They spoke of a species that lived among the stars, beings who looked small and weak but carried within them a fury that could bring down galactic empires. They warned their young that some prey animals were too dangerous to hunt because they would drag their predators down with them. The galaxy had learned to fear not humanity's weapons or technology, but something far more dangerous. They had learned to fear a species that would rather burn the universe than live as slaves. In the depths of space, automated beacons broadcast a message that every spacefaring species had memorized. It was Jake Morrison's original transmission, played on repeat throughout human territory. This is Captain Jake Morrison to all consortium forces. Every human you take, we will take back. Every facility you build, we will destroy. Every world you occupy, we will make into your graveyard. The message had become humanity's promise to the galaxy. As long as the stars burned, as long as humans drew breath, nobody would ever again make the mistake of thinking that Earth's children could be conquered without paying a price that made victory meaningless. The war was over, but its lessons echoed through the cosmos. Humanity had taught the galaxy that some species were too dangerous to enslave, too proud to break, and too stubborn to surrender. They had proven that the will to fight could overcome any technological advantage, and that a species united in rage could bring down civilizations that had ruled for millennia. The stars themselves seemed dimmer now, as if they too had learned to respect the humans who refused to go quietly into the dark. And in the silence between the worlds, the galaxy whispered a new truth that would endure forever. Some species were not meant to be conquered. Some fights were not worth winning, and some fury once awakened would burn until the universe itself grew cold.